hello, and welcome to Stop, Let's Team Up, My Legion Adventure 65. And we're going to do the story, the two parts, the two issues of Adventure Comics that introduce Mordru the Merciless. And I'm excited to talk about them because, sometimes I don't talk as much about the comic, but I talk about what it means to me and one because of when I read it and what. And this is one of those. So let's do the general information and blah, blah, blah for the first issue, and then we'll get going. All right, first up is Adventure Comics 369. Oh, disclaimer, we have skipped Superboy 147 because I already kind of covered that with Jimbo a few months back in the episode about Legion Origin. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes for this one. So, we're doing Adventure Comics 369, cover date to June 1968. An amazing cover by Neil Adams and Gaspar Celadano, and it is the hands of Mordru coming through a safe with Superboy Mon-El and Shadowlass cringing. And it says at the bottom, featuring Mordru the Merciless. Mordru screaming as he breaks out of the safe, or the cage, or whatever. He says, Legionnaires, say your prayers. I warned you, no vault could keep me prisoner. And Mon-El says, we're dead. His magic is greater than our combined superpowers. It's a great cover. And I'm going to go through, when I talk about these, I'm not going to go through the archives. I'm going to go through the Treasury that I've had since the day it came out, which it was reprinted in Superboy and Legion of Superheroes. It is C number 49 of the DC Treasuries. And we're going to talk about that a bit later. But this first story is called Mordru the Merciless. It's 24 pages. Part 2 is called Mordru and the Mob, which I will giggle about soon. Editor, plotter, Mort Weisinger. Plotter, scripter, penciler. Layouts only, Jim Shooter. Penciler, Kurt Swan. Inkers, Kurt Swan. Page 1 only. Jack Abel for the rest. We'll talk about that. Letterer, Gaspar Celadano, page 1. And Charlotte Jeter for the rest. Roll call, Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, Sunboy, Dual Damsel, Superboy, Invisible Kid, Ultra Boy, Dream Girl, Princess Projector, Mon-El, Shadowlass. Guest stars, Jonathan and Martha Kent and Lana Lang. Supporting character, White Witch. Is this her? Nope, last seen in 351. Ah, that's right, she isn't. She was in Mysterio. Love White Witch, and I'm a huge fan of when she becomes a member later, because she's in that, there's a quartet of heroes in that era. Block, Invisible Kid 2, White Witch, and Timberwolf that I love. They love them all equally as number 2, second only to Element Lad in that era. And this is the first appearance of Mordru the Merciless, who is the big bad for a lot of Legion stories to come. I'm going to get the synopsis from Mike's amazing Comic World because it's just a little more concise and short, to be honest with you. 4 Legionnaires on duty at the headquarters, Superboy, Mon-El, Shadowlass, and Dual Damsel, hastily use their time cube to escape to the 20th century Smallville as Mordru, the Dark Lord, pursues them. As a new Legionnaire, Shadowlass has been exploring the sub-basement in which Mordru was imprisoned in a vault and tried to open it. Mon-El spied her and warned her to stop and told her Mordru's story. The villain hailed from Xerox. I used to work for Xerox in the 80s. The Sorcerer's Planet, and after mastering the ultimate mystic powers, made himself master of that world and conquered his sector of the galaxy. Saturn Girl was the Legion leader at the time, and when Mordru attacked the Earth, the teams battled with him seemed futile until she directed Superboy and Mon-El to imprison him in an airless steel block, thus depriving him of his powers. He fell into a coma and has remained in that state since. However, Shadowlass's tampering has caused air to seep into the block and revive him. Now forced to flee, the 4 Legionnaires quickly realize Mordru will soon find them and decide to adopt secret identities in hopes of eluding him. With the assistance of Superboy's foster parents, Jonathan and Martha Kent, Mon-El resumes the guise of Bob Cobb, the identity he used when he first met Superboy. Dual Damsel becomes Marie Elkins, a supposed second cousin of Smallville Police Chief Parker's wife, with whom she stays, and Shadowlass becomes Betsy Norcross, an exchange student who resides with Lana's family. Mordru arrives and causes a deep shadow to penetrate the town to find the missing Legionnaires. In doing this, he puts Lana under his control and sees everything she does. As the days pass, the heroes stay hidden as possible and try to come up with a plan, while Mordru does his best to flush them out. Then a week after their arrival, King Carter and his gangsters come to Smallville to take it over, because Mordru, the young heroes, fear to use their powers to stop them. Instead, with Jonathan Kent leading, the townspeople are convinced to stand against the mob and fight back. The crooks are overcome, and this gives the Legionnaires the moral resolve to do the same with Mordru. As they resume their costumes and gather in an alley behind the Kent house, Lana spies them from her window. Mordru now finds them and suddenly materializes before the heroes. So as I talk about this, I'm going to go through my Treasury edition, which was published in 1976. I was 12 years old when I got this. That was, Jesus Christ on a crutch. I'm 58, so 40 some years ago. I'm not doing that math. It's scary. And it's gorgeous. I do like that the first page was inked by Curt Swan himself. I think it's one of the best pages I've ever seen of Curt Swan. It is the 4 Legionnaires being menaced by this giant face of Mordru the Merciless. I think I shared that yesterday. Then we turn and Jack Abel takes over the inks. I'm not normally a Jack Abel fan, but he works with Mr. Swan. But this is just a great story. It starts while they're fleeing. We don't know what's happened yet. And then they immediately go to Smallville. And on the second actual page of the story, we see what Shadowlass did. We see that flashback. And then we see a flashback within a flashback, where we see early on they fought them and we didn't. And he appeared as a giant. With a really his costume, the way he looks when he's a giant really looks like a bad Daredevil villain costume. But it's a great story. And he's badass powerful in this. And he takes him down. He breaks out. They flee to Smallville and they take up all their secret identities. And and they almost mess up. Dual Damsel knows how to sneak in and out of the basement. Shadowlass flubs up a little bit and goes, "Oh, look. Look, where do we keep your schoolatrons?" A schoolatron. I love future school education. But I don't know. Let me get to the end of both of them and I'll talk about it. Okay, now part 2 is called Mordru and the Mob. I like all the bits at the top where Mordru's trying to flush them out by, sending illusions and stuff at them. But they don't do it. They don't break. They don't stop. They do little things to prevent themselves from being discovered. Some of the makeup that keeps Shadowlass looking Caucasian rubs off, and Superboy squirts ink on a guy and goes, "Look, it's just ink." Silly things like that, comic things. Dual Damsel saves one truck from running into another by throwing a sign with a heavy rectangular base on the street, causing the one truck to roll up the base of it and flip, which I think is kind of cool. And I really like Curt Swan's layouts in this book. It's just, some little nothing crazy, but it's good. And then the mob shows up. Okay, there's a human fly crook who's stealing from the gem exchange. Smallville's big enough that they have a gem exchange, but that just didn't make any sense. But then the mob shows up, and it is the silliest stuff in the world. It is so... I had forgotten about this. Because I think of Mordru as this big dark villain, but I do like the story. I don't understand why the mobster's driving around on the top of his car in a living room chair, like he's like some kind of king. But I do like how the kids convince all the grown-ups to throw vegetables at them from the roofs, but to chase them out. Mon-El and Superboy help a little bit, so do Dual Damsel, but nothing to give them away. But then when they're talking, and they decide that the people of Smallville were so brave, why can't we? They put their costumes on, and then Lana unwillingly lets the cat out of the bag, and then Mordru finds him. In the splash page of the back at the end of the comic is Mordru towering over him. It's a great panel. All right, let's move on to Adventure Comics 370. All right, so this lovely comic was cover dated July 1968. Editor, plotter, Mort Weisinger. Plotter, scripter, layouts, only Jim Shooter. Got a little tongue-tied there. Penciler, Kurt Swan. Inker, Jack Abel. Roll call, Monel, Superboy, Dual Damsel, Shadow Lass, Invisible Kid, Dream Girl, Ultra Boy, Princess Projectra. Guest stars Lon Lang and Pete Ross. Villains Mordru, including Mordru plus some other villains. Members of the Devil's Jury, Dorzak called in, Glogro, Turn, and Mordru's Army. White Witch again as a guest. I think in the other index, I'm using Mike's for this, and I use my episode guide or issue guide, so that White Witch doesn't appear until this one. All right, let's go to this synopsis. Mordru easily crushes the 4 Legionnaires with his magic, but they escape by burrowing underground. Rushing back to the Kent house, Superboy swiftly constructs a hypnosis machine to erase theirs and the Kent's memories for an hour, so Mordru can't trace their thoughts. As they resume their earlier civilian guises, Mordru searches the minds of the Smallville populace in vain, but his probing causes the hypnosis to continue past its 1-hour limit. The villain then summons his armies to ferret out the Legionnaires and causes Smallville to rise into space in order to limit their search. Pete Ross wonders why Superboy doesn't stop the armies and realize that the Boy of Steel has forgotten who he is. He summons Lana Lang to a deserted house and confides the secret that Superboy is Clark Kent. With Lana as Insect Queen, they kidnap Clark and restore his memory. Superboy then does the same for his Legion comrades, and they make plans to stop Mordru and his army. The next day, the Legionnaires show themselves in battle against the invaders, but they are easily defeated and taken to Mordru's cave headquarters outside town. Actually, Pete is disguised as Superboy, and Dual Damsel has betrayed both herself and Shadowlass. The real Superboy, Shadowlass, and Insect Queen are safe, and as the captive heroes are brought before Mordru, their allies come to rescue them. Stunned, Mordru is initially overwhelmed, but easily recovers. After defeating the heroes again, he holds a mock trial before a jury of 30th century criminals with his lackey Rathor as prosecutor. Pete is as defense attorney, and he attempts to shock the criminals into siding with him, but fails. Then Mordru, at Rathor's suggestion, sentences all 6 youths to slow death inside a lead-lined kryptonite vault. The heroes soon find the vault is a fake, and after they break out, Rathor appears and tells them that Pete's speech broke Mordru's spell over him. As he helps them to freedom, Mordru disintegrates him and imprisons the heroes in a force field that he creates. Then he creates a fireball and lifts it over his head, intending to hurl it down on them. This causes the cave walls to crumble and collapse about him, sealing him underground, seemingly forever. The Legionnaires return to Smallville, and Superboy uses his hypnosis ray to erase Lana's knowledge of his secret identity, but Mon-El prevents him from doing the same to Pete, instead causing him to forget that Pete knows his secret, because Pete is destined to someday use that information to save Superman's life. When the 4 Legionnaires return to Legion headquarters, Invisible Kid explains that Mordru's attempt to destroy them failed because Dream Girl foresaw his attack and summoned her sister, White Witch, to protect them with her magic. With Princess Projecta cast an illusion to make him think that he had succeeded. All right. That was still a little too long of a synopsis. Let me get back to this Treasury. I'm holding it in my hand. It's so cool. It's falling apart, folks. It is. The only thing holding it together is the damn bag it's in. I will say the splash page for the second story is not as exciting. It's Pete holding up Superboy's costume. Again, Jack Abel art, which is not one of my favorites on Kurt Swan. But him and Insect Queen are trying to convince Clark that he is Superboy. But then we jump right back to the action where Mordru defeats the 4 Legionnaires, and then they escape. I will say that the page where the hypnosis machine, this is a panel where they're using the hypnosis machines on themselves. That is one that has stuck with me, and I really do love this issue. Them all, all the stuff going on, they're undercover in a way, they've forgotten who they are, and Mordru's searching. This is just a really engaging story, and Mordru finds all the clues to find out who they are. And it's just cool. I like this issue more than I like the other one. I like the invaders. I like how the townsfolk are still being brave, but then they get corralled out. I like that how the heroes have forgotten themselves. So Pete Ross and Lana have to come and save the day. I love Lana as Insect Queen. Since I've started the read through, I really appreciate her more as a character. And I think since I did a last rerun of this, that there was something like Smallville, and stuff like that, where there are new versions of Lana in the cartoons and stuff, where she could be front and center. So I like Lana back in these more. I do like the second part of the story. It's called The Condemned Crusaders, them defeating and then the trial. And I remember all this. This is a really fun comic. There's a splash page that is used for the cover. There's a cover of this where they're being, tried and they're in front of the jury. And it's just a really great comic of the trial scene is like bad TV law drama, but it works. I like that I'm digging it. And how he accidentally traps himself. And I think he does that a couple times in the history. This is not the Mordru that you'll come to know like in the 80s and stuff like that, or even in the 70s. Because he's just, it's a different time, so the villains have to be a little more simplistic. And I've just spent the bulk of this episode doing the normal spiel and the normal format. But I do kind of want to talk about one I'm holding in this trade that I've had since I was 12 years old. I may have gotten it when I was 11 because my birthday's near the end of the year. So I say I was 11. 1976, and I'm 58, and I was 12, was 44 years ago, 46 years ago, I got this comic. For almost 47 years, I guess. And it's got this great, wraparound cover by Grell. Everybody's seen it. It's them all flying out of the Legion headquarters. I'll take a picture of it. I mean, it's okay. It's already falling apart. I can't do much damage. It's got all the Legionnaires at the time. Tyrock's even on it. Element Lad in his blue and green costume, which I do with the air. I like Chemical King. It's perfect. But it has all this extra stuff in it. Let me talk to you about that. It's got, at the middle, between the two issues, it's got a nice big one-panel page. And I don't know where it's originally from, but it's the second Legion headquarters from the outside, and then there's a 2-page spread with a cutaway of that headquarters, which is the headquarters I remember. Then it's got the double-page spread from The Wedding of Dual Damsel and Bouncing Boy by Dave Cockrum, which is an incredible image. And then it's got Dave Cockram's More of the Legion Headquarters Complex, a tour. And it's a mix of Grell and Cockrum and Swan panels, and just shows you some of the different rooms in the headquarters, and then back to it. And then there's in the back is a key to who everybody is in the wedding picture. But this is like, my brother bought this, and these were big, and I've got the Grell one that has been turned into the hardcover. I still have my original. They're the only two treasuries I still have because as a Legion fan, I kept them. These were great. I would lay down in the living room and open and read and read. The reason this thing's falling apart is I have probably read this physical copy of this comic 100 times. 200, I don't know. I probably traced on it. It's all worn and weathered, and I'm never giving it up. It doesn't have any value, probably. It's so beat up. And I know treasuries are hard to get sometimes, but to me, it's why I keep my coverless 10-cent Adventure Comics 247. It has no value except it does have it has an emotional art and pop culture and whatever you want to call it has a value in our lives because it's a gateway to memory. If that makes sense, that comics have always been the thing that made me happy. I mean, other things, theater, my wife, cats, dogs, other comics, but movies, Star Trek. I just watched some amazing the first season of Stranger Worlds. Rewatched it because next month the new show comes out. But there's times when you're reading a book again, reading a comic again, seeing a movie again, and certain emotions. And, I saw, when I read this, I was in my parents' house where we lived until right when my folks split up. So I was in through junior high. And I would have had this, we've been living in there when I got this. So I'm from there. I mean, it goes that far back, and I remember that house, and I remember my older brother Huey giving me comics. I remember laying down on the floor and drawing the Legionnaires and coloring them in and cutting them out. I'd made paper figures because I had some Migos and we had dolls, but I wanted to play superhero, and that was my little tick as a kid. I made lists of roll calls, and I drew paper dolls of the heroes, and I memorized everything. And when my brother would find a book with some reference material about comics, like the Fleischer things, or these where I could see past reprints, and he could explain some of the history, and he was bringing more old comics in. It just all flooded back, and it was great, and I loved it, and it was the perfect thing this week. I have been alone for 2 weeks. My wife is taking care of her mom. And I'm just kind of sitting in the living room by myself with the cats. Dogs went with my wife. Enjoying comics. And I've been catching up on stuff. I just went to the new comic day. I just read the new Brave and the Bold. #1, it's great. I'm not going to do an episode on it probably until all of them are out, maybe. I don't know if I will. But I do recommend that you get the couples comic counseling episode. Listen to it today. I listened to it today, and it was a great episode. And they interview Tom King and Mitch Gerads about the Batman story, but all of it's... as I was tweeting today with Marty, or Marty and me were commenting on one of my tweets, he wondered what I thought, and I said I liked everything for different reasons. I'm a big fan of King and Gerads, so I liked the Joker story, and he made a point of, about Joker stories, and I said, this is the first Joker story I've read in a long time, because I don't really like Joker stories. I think I've read, I'm really leery of them. I'm not interested in, I don't read a lot of Batman. I jump in and out when someone tells me there's a good arc, and I read that arc. But I like the Joker, but I think the Joker's been overused, so I kind of don't want to overload my palette, my comic palette. Dan Moore wrote and drew a future Batman story, which I didn't kind of sink in. I'm waiting for the rest of it. And then there is a Mr. Cantwell. What is your first name? Christopher Cantwell and Javier Rodriguez do a Superman story, which is gorgeous. Anything Javier Rodriguez does, I will buy. I like Mr. Cantwell's writing. And then there's a Stormwatch story, which I really only kind of like because Mr. Bones was in, and that was by Ed Brisses and Jeff Spokes. But listen to the Couple Counseling's episode. I think you'll be in for a treat. And they also have a great interview with Tom King about Danger Street, the latest Danger Street, which I have not done my episode. I will be doing that. It will go up on Sunday, which is about the Dingbats. But that's another great episode. So I'm going to post both those links and the link to the Legion of Superheroes origin episode that me and Jimbo did a few months back. So this Sunday, folks, this is going up Friday night. And Sunday we'll go up the Dingbats issue, which is issue 6. And I'll record my episode about that. And first issue special 6 with the introduction of the Dingbats. It's another Jack Kirby comic, and I'm kind of looking to see what I feel about it, because I don't think I've read it. And I've not read ahead. So if I hadn't read the first issue special comic when it came out in the 70s, I have not read it in the 2020s. All right. So that's our schedule for the week. As always, folks, be safe, be smart. For God's sake, be kind to each other and read some comics. There's a lot of good ones. I can't wait to dig into this week's pile.